this rail comes down and fits in place, this bead is going to get coped to slide right over this bead. It's pretty easy to do, this coping, but just go slow with it. Put your piece in the clamp. And mark off the height of the bead. Just take your ruler. If it's a 1/4 inch bead, mark off a 1/4 inch. In my case it's 3/16, so mark off 3/16, and then take your bench chisel and basically put a miter at 45 between that mark and where the bead terminates in this little fillet. So you want a mitered edge, basically, a 45-degree angle all the way down this face. There we go. And one of the beauties of doing it that way, zoom in a little bit more so you can see this, is that face, what you're left with on the face then, is exactly the profile that you need to carve out for the cope. So when you put that bevel on there, it just naturally defines this slope, or this curve. Now what I'll do is get a carving gouge and come right straight down orthogonal to this face, come down and punch that out, and then come in from this way with my bench chisel and basically clean that out. And what I'm left with then is a cope that I can slide right on top. Find a gouge that's got the same sweep as that profile and start way on the end and just nibble a little bit at a time. You can twist as you go down. The important thing is that the bevel of the gouge, that bevel, has got to be what's perpendicular as you're making these plunge cuts. Don't try to get the gouge to be perpendicular, because then the bevel is going to put an angled surface on your cut. You don't want that. If anything, you want this to be slightly reentrant. Here we go. Take a small bench chisel and clean out the waste. Be a little bit careful at the very tip, because there's not much wood there. It can break out very easily. So what we're left with, if I can get this thing to focus, go back here I guess. That's what we're left with viewing it from the edge. It looks like a 45, but when you roll it around here you see that it's a cope. And then that cope is going to slide right against the bead of the style. So let's see how this fits together. This one's a little tight. This one's not bad. I'm going to have to do some adjusting, and we'll go through that in a second. But now, bring this up to the camera, and you can see how that cope slides right over the fillet on the rail. Right? See that? I'll slide it apart a little bit. Again, you can get a look at it. There you go. So that's how that joint comes together. Now, what I haven't done yet is when I sawed off the tenon, or the excess from the tenon, I didn't go right to my line. So now I'm going to come back with a bench chisel. I'll clamp this in the vise and come back and punch right to my line down to the tenon. Do that on both sides, and I'll just watch the joint in. As I clean this edge up, I'll watch the joint come together. And ultimately I want a joint that's a nice joint that's got no openings between it. And just to show this again, this particular joint line has got, there's a sizable gap there. It's probably a 32nd of an inch, I'm guessing. The backside probably a little bit larger than that even. So I'll trim those down. Where it's binding right now is right in the very tip of this cope. So I'll go in with my gouge and clean out that cope a little bit. So basically what you're doing at this point is just fitting this thing, figuring out where it's binding, removing a little material at a time until this joint comes together nicely. And then I'll have a through mortise and tenon coped joint. It would be a beautiful, beautiful looking joint when I'm all done. So I'm going to shut the tape off, just do some finessing of this joint, and I'll show you the end result. Tuning up all these joints, and the frame is good to go. Overall they're not bad. This gives you a flavor for what they should look like when they're done. And the back side, so I can spin these around and get dizzy doing this. There's another one right in the ends. So the next thing we want to do is get our raised panel complete so that we can go ahead and glue this door up. Now I've cut the raised panel itself. I haven't put on the bevel yet, but I cut the board, spent some time planing it, and finding an area that I really like the figure on. Generally I'll cut these oversized in width and height, lay them underneath the door like this, and then move this door frame around to find both the orientation of the grain as well as the figure that I like best. And then so sometimes you'll have to turn the frame to get the best look, and then I'll trace that in, oversize it by whatever my dado depth is on the sides of the frame, and then cut it. So I've done that. I've also marked in the dimension of where our shoulder will stop for the bevel, and laid the frame over again just to get a flavor for what that raised panel will look like. And I'm pretty happy with it. So we're going to go ahead and commit the panel at this point. So I just by hand marked in where those where the edge of the raised portion will be, but now I need to commit it with a scribe. This is no different than we did early on in the casework making the dovetails. Just set my scribe for whatever depth I want, offset. These are in the plans, and then scribe away. Now you want to make this really deep because we're going to have a pretty good fillet on that raised panel, and this knife edge will help clearly define where that fillet is. Remember to keep that fence real tight against the stock as you're making the scribe. And there we go. Well, the next step is to put on the bevel. But before I do that, we'll also make a mark on the back side, back edge of the panel. Now this is very similar to what we did on the back, the case back. You can do this freehand with a pencil if you want, or as long as I have the marking gauge here, I'll just do it with the marking gauge quickly. This is just the dimension at which I want to stop my bevel. And it'll just ensure that as long as you stop on this line, that your bevel is uniform. Here we go.